What's the craziest thing you've seen unfold live on television before it could be taken off air censored? The Challenger exploding when I was in elementary school. The whole school was watching it on TV in the auditorium. I live in Florida and my whole class watched it outside in the schoolyard. I was in 3rd grade. The teacher rushed us inside and we didn't really understand what was going on. I still see it in my dreams occasionally. And now when I take my kids to see launches, there is always that moment when I hold my breath. Weird fact about me. I was in the exact same room at a school when the Challenger exploded and then when the first plane hit on 9/11. For the Challenger, I was in my 4th grade classroom, and for 9/11, I was a teacher in that school in that classroom. Please never go back to that classroom again. We need to try to avoid future disasters. Where do you think they were when COVID hit? George Bush doesn't care about black people. Kanye West. I will never forget the look on Mike Myers' face. When I was a kid, TV shows were interrupted all the time for high-speed chases and police standoffs. One time a helicopter was tracking a guy who was driving through a field. The driver hopped out of his van with a shotgun. The reporter was telling the helicopter to pan away from the shot, but they didn't. The driver then put the shotgun in his mouth and blew his head off on live TV. The camera cut and came back to the in-studio reporter who had a defeated what the fuck look on his face. I swear this led to less situations like this being shown on TV. Those high-speed chases were cancer. But I have to say that one time a dude stole a tank and started driving it around San Diego was about the most exciting thing I'd ever seen on the news at that age. This sounds like one I saw as a kid in California. Except it was a pickup truck, it was on a highway, and before shooting himself, he unfurled a sign that said something about HMOs, lit his truck on fire that had a dog inside, and then shot himself with the shotgun. It was coverage interrupting after-school cartoons too. After Hurricane Katrina, the people stuck in Eno at the stadium and gathered on a freeway overpass dying of thirst and hungry as hell. News saying the government didn't know where people were so they couldn't drop food and water was surreal because the news crews literally had the people on TV with captions of their locations, but nope. Both local and federal government couldn't figure it out. My unit from the Marines at the time was amphibious. We got recalled from a long weekend to drive to Eno from SoCal. We started packing to go and were told to turn around. The National Guard would be handling it. So we sat in the barracks and watched them sink trucks in the water trying to get through. The reporter in a canoe covering how bad the floods were, and then 2 dudes walked through the puddles she's floating in. Runner up to the guy pretending there were hurricane force winds and bracing himself while yelling into the mic same thing happened. Some dudes just kind of walked by in the background. Both times the poor reporters had to pretend it didn't happen, and both times it was absolutely hilarious. Like that time on the Weather Channel when a tree fell in front of a reporter. It was obviously being thrown by a crew member. When I was around 7 years old in Panama City, Florida, 2 teenagers hacked into the local news feed. We were in the living room watching the news and it started to break up and then went to snow. Before my dad could get up to mess with the rabbit ears, the signal resolved to show 2 kids in a bedroom looking at something off screen. Then they looked at the camera. Once they realized they were on live TV, they started screaming and hugging each other and jumping around yelling, "We did it! We did it! Ah!" After a few seconds the signal resolved and went back to the newscaster who apologized for the disruption. Then they just went back to reporting the news like nothing happened. This is so stupid, but I was a youngin' when it happened. A guy was holding up a sign on the Today Show, or some national morning TV show, that said, "Marry me Julia," or something like that. Willard Scott or Al Roker or someone went up to the guy and said, "Tell us a little about Julia," and the guy was like, "Nope, I'd rather marry Steve," and started making out on camera with the guy next to him. The host booked it and was like, "Uakeki onto the weather." Prior to then I'd never even heard about being gay, let alone seen anything like it. I'm not sure why that image stuck with me, though it was pretty shocking at the time. Shock tactics were part of the gay rights movement back then. They had to expose the world to the fact that gay people even existed. Still today, many backwards nations deny having gay citizens. The LA riots were really brutal to watch on television. They tried to not show any graphic violence, but sometimes it just happened. You saw a lot of footage of people looting and running up and down streets throwing things and hitting people, but nothing really bad until those men caught Reginald Denny stranded in his truck at an intersection. They smashed the truck windows and dragged him by his hair, I think, out of the truck and just stomped the ever-loving crap out of him, and the camera never moved. It was a news helicopter shooting down so you could see the entire intersection, and it legitimately looked like you were seeing a man beaten to death right on television. And then when you thought it was over, there was that kick, and you just knew he was dead. You just knew no one could survive that, and it was so upsetting and terrifying to see that kind of unbridled violence take place live right in front of you. And then came the helpers. A few men, one of them a very large black man, came to Denny's rescue, and the attackers scattered like stray, vicious dogs, and they helped Denny. They saved his life. It was only a few minutes, but until 9/11 it was one of the most dramatic things I'd ever seen on television. I saw the Reginald Denny incident live as it unfolded. I was thinking, why are they standing around filming it? Why aren't people helping? I still have bad dreams about it. Remember, this was way before people had cell phones and videoed everything. Many of the people who went to help Reginald Denny were watching on TV and recognized the intersection. So, the live feed may have saved Denny's life. Also, the news reporters filming it were in a helicopter. It would be quite difficult to land the helicopter in the middle of LA during a riot. It wasn't so crazy as much as the impact of it was to television. But the Janet Jackson boob was so bizarre. It seemed completely planned and everyone was unsure as to what exactly was supposed to happen. But it seemed like something that wasn't supposed to. It was all very puzzling, and then the controversy started blowing up. I didn't see it, but I remember reading all about Owen Hart falling to his death on live television. If I had been watching, that easily would have been the craziest thing I've ever seen, along with the saddest and absolute worst. But it was an NHL game, and one player fell and his skate cut the jugular of his opponent. Blood squirted out like a hose, staining the ice, sending him immediately to the locker room, and a full recovery was had. When I went to look it up the next day, I clicked on the first thing without checking and ended up with my first computer virus. The team doctor ran out there, reached into the wound and held the arteries shut with his fingers. Team trainer, but he had been an army medic during Vietnam and was able to stop the bleeding. Imagine having to put those skills to use again. I was watching a live broadcast in Texas. The reporter was saying that every year the police have to burn all of the drugs that they seize in all their drug busts. It was mostly huge piles of marijuana, probably a 10-foot high or so pile. The reporter was in the foreground, and she mentioned that most of the police were off duty and volunteering to be there so that the blaze wouldn't get out of control. So all these police and this pile of weed are in the background, and it is lit. As the pile starts roaring into a big bonfire, even I could tell that they were standing way too close to it. At least 30 or 40 police officers all standing really close to this bonfire with their backs to the camera. So this reporter decides to ask one of them a question and walks over and taps one of them on the shoulder. This high AF police officer turns around as this reporter is asking him something, and he looks directly at the camera with these squinty red eyes and goes, "What the fuck?" That time Randy Johnson vaporized a bird with his pitch. I was at a sports bar with my parents, and half paying attention to the game when I saw the ball explode into a big poof of feathers. When I was a kid, I was watching the news and saw some people in Sarajevo being pulled off the back of a truck and shot. Never forgot it. It was daytime, and I think it might have been live, the BBC or something, but it has stayed with me ever since. I also remember seeing news footage from Sarajevo. A family was in a graveyard for a funeral and snipers started shooting at them. I was 15 or 16 and started crying. My dad said, "Why are you crying? There's nothing you can do." And I looked at him and said, "Why do you think I'm crying?" But I see more what he means now. But still, that family. I swear I've seen it, but I've never found it again. David Letterman was hosting The Tonight Show, and he had a pair of ferrets on his desk. The zoo guy was talking about them, and they freaked out and started running around his desk. Their leash got caught in the microphone, so they started going in circles, defecating the whole time, even splashing David. They went to commercial, and afterwards the ferrets were gone, and David was cleaned up. I had never laughed so hard. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen happen live on TV? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.